What's up, fam? Welcome back to the I Am More Than podcast. Today's going to be a solo episode, which I'm really excited about, but I'll be honest, I'm also very nervous about it because this is going to be the most deeply personal episode that I've ever shared with you guys, as I'm going to be talking about a lot of things that I've never publicly talked about. I've never gone into depth about it on my social media or on this podcast. And I finally feel like I'm ready to dive into some of these parts of my journey that I haven't been super transparent about on here. And I realized last week when I was sitting making content for the podcast, a memory popped up on my computer. And it's been 3 years since I launched More Than, and 3 years since I put out my first podcast episode. And it really made me go into this memory lane deep dive about all that we've done over the past 3 years and the craziness that this journey has really been for me. And it made me want to reconnect with my why of why I'm doing this, why I'm putting out podcast episodes, why I'm trying to grow a female empowerment company. And I think that I've been pushing forward for so long and looking to the future and how we want to grow and where I hope to go. And I don't spend a lot of time looking back. And I think a lot of the times when I do look back and I realize how far I've come, it centers me a little bit. It makes that fire inside of me burn that much more because I remember why I'm doing this to begin with. So I've expressed throughout the past 4 seasons in little bits and pieces about why I'm so passionate about the I Am More Than podcast and highlighting incredible women's stories and journeys. And I think for the people that know me personally, they know my mission and what I'm trying to achieve here. But I realize there's so many of you tuning in that don't know me personally, don't know my story. And I'm just another podcast that's popping up on your Spotify or Apple, and you're trying to decide whether or not you're going to invest the next 45 minutes with me or not. And I appreciate that you're even here giving me a chance. But I think for a lot of you that have been part of our OG community, you've pieced bits and pieces together of who I am and what my why is and what More Than is in general. But I wanted to do this episode to give you a deeper understanding and to also just reflect on how far I've come. And I also think that this is going to be really healing in a sense that I can connect with a lot of you on a deeper level. So I want to talk about bits and pieces of important aspects of my journey that's gotten me to this point, that's built More Than to what it is now. And I also want to share some really valuable, deep lessons that I've been reflecting on over this last week, because I think when you make it through painful chapters of your life and you can look back with hindsight, you can see all the lessons that you were learning during that time that you could not at all see when you were in the middle of it. And I feel like that's the place that I am finally arriving to after a healing journey that has taken me, almost a decade. So I really don't know how else to start other than to just go back to the beginning and try and give a little bit of order to my story so that you can understand where I'm coming from. So for those of you who don't know, I'm from a super small town in Colorado. It's called Monument. I'm one of 3 kids. I'm a middle child, classic middle child. And I've always just been a very anxious and fearful person. For as long as I can remember, I've just been a very cautious. I really like to assess my surroundings. I like to think through every decision that I'm about to make. I wouldn't classify myself as a risk taker in any way. And when I think back to myself as a child and then to where I am now, I feel like there's no greater risk than starting your own business or talking about your struggles and your story publicly online. So it's kind of interesting to see how I've grown and just changed over time. But I feel like that fear and that anxiety was so deep rooted in me my whole life. And I see that as a trend throughout really my journey. And it's something that I have to actively work on. So, like I said, I was a very anxious and just nervous, fearful kid. I would say that I've always been relatively shy, which shocks people, but I am more reserved when I don't know my surroundings or the people that are around me. When I'm in new environments, it actually takes a lot for me to be an extrovert, even though that's something that is very fulfilling for me. So I always really just wanted to find that sense of belonging and community growing up. I'm one of those people that have a very, very tight circle. I always have. I've always had a handful of very close friends. And I've always been very, very close with my family, especially my mom and my sister. That's always kind of been my security blanket. And then when it goes further than that, it's always just kind of been like surface level friends and acquaintances. And when I was getting ready to graduate high school, I really wanted to make a change in my life. I didn't want to stay in a small town. I wanted to see what else was out there. I wanted to relate to people on a different level. And I felt like when you grow up somewhere and you've known these people your whole life, you can't really discover new aspects of yourself. And that's something I really wanted. So I decided to move to Arizona to go to Arizona State University when I was a senior in high school. So I moved out to Arizona. Thankfully, my very best friend, Dana, decided to go to Arizona State as well. So I knew one person. I had one like safe person to go into this brand new chapter with, but I got very, very sick as soon as we moved to Arizona. Well, even a little bit beforehand, I started getting sick in Colorado and we couldn't quite figure out what was going on. I had just a lot of stomach issues to the point that I remember being in so much physical pain, I couldn't sit up straight. Getting out of bed was really difficult. Everything that I was eating was making me sick. And we just really couldn't figure out what was happening. And it's almost like a switch just flipped. So when we got to Arizona, I was trying to just push through it as much as I could so that I could enjoy this new chapter in my life, and ended up, well, my whole family ended up moving to Arizona as well. Thank goodness. That was such a saving grace. And my mom would take me to the Mayo Clinic regularly. We went for 3 months of nonstop testing because they thought I had a tumor somewhere. So I got every test known to mankind, really trying to figure things out. And after a million tests and I was placed on 13 different medications, I was basically told, like, we don't know exactly what's going on. So you're just going to be on these medications and like, we can keep trying to test, but essentially just learn to live with your symptoms. And I was so discouraged at that time. I am, 17, 18 years old and was basically living back at home with my parents, even though I still had my dorm at ASU. I was barely going to classes. I wasn't meeting people. And this medication just completely changed my personality. And I was just fed up. I was so frustrated with it. So I ended up being introduced to a trainer at the time who had similar stomach issues to what I had. And long story short, he basically said if I dedicated 90 days to training with him, that I'd be off all medication and I could manage my symptoms holistically. And that's really all I wanted. I started studying nutrition during that time, switched my major over to it, and really just wanted to try and like heal myself as naturally and as holistically as possible. So adding this fitness element just seemed very natural. So we started training together, and slowly but surely I started taking medication like one after another, just quitting it cold turkey and basically seeing what would happen. And at the end of those 90 days, I was off all my medication. I felt like I got my personality back a little bit. And I started feeling like my life just opened back up to me again. Because prior to getting sick, I was just really insecure. I've always struggled with really deep insecurity and confidence issues. I was always one of the tallest girls around. I was a bigger girl. When I was on the cheerleading team, I was one of the biggest ones there. And it just like messed deeply with my self-confidence and my self-worth. So I had always exercised or crash dieted or yo-yo dieted to change my physical appearance. But when I got sick, it was the first time that I could give two craps about my physical appearance. I just wanted to feel healthy. Not having your health was the most devastating thing ever because everything else is taken away from you then. You're not up for living and going out and being social and doing the things that make you you. So during that time, I was exercising not in vain, not to lose weight, just solely to start feeling better. So that really started sinking something into my brain about the fact that when I am just taking care of myself and focusing on feeling good over looking good, I can get results because my intentions are in the right place. So that started to very loosely piece together during this time. And I remember starting to feel a little bit better. And I was training at a gym that was filled with fitness competitors. And so at the time, I thought they were like the poster children for health. And everybody's working out and like their sports bra and booty shorts which was my like worst fear ever. And everyone just seemed to be so confident and loved exercising and loved eating their chicken and broccoli. And it was like, maybe I'm going to try that. I'm just going to push myself, see if I could do it. I was never really a big sports girl. Like I said, I was a cheerleader, I was a dancer, but I wasn't in competitive sports. And so setting out a goal and training to achieve this goal was very, very new for me. And I really wanted to see what I was capable of. So I set my mind to it. I had 3 months to get ready for this fitness competition, and I was completely naive. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I became laser focused on achieving this goal. Nothing was going to stop me. And what started as a very healthy, pure intentioned way to take care of myself slowly over time evolved into a very unhealthy addiction, essentially. I was addicted to exercising and to trying to lose weight. So I was up at 5:30 in the morning. I would go to the gym, run my sprints. I was typically there for about 3 hours. And then was doing cardio after, would come home, try and do homework. I was working at the time and was meal prepping all of my food, which slowly went from like healthy meal preps into like just straight tilapia and asparagus and a rice cake 3 times a day. But at the time, I couldn't see that anything that I was doing long-term damage. It was all just, I'm just trying to get to this goal. And once I get to this goal, then I'll like reevaluate whether or not what I'm doing is healthy. So I go through the 3 months. I start taking fat burners on top of barely nourishing myself. And before I was getting ready to step on stage, I had lost over 50 pounds. I was skin and bones. And that's an experience that I've never felt before. I've never been called skinny. I've never felt, I don't even know how to explain it outside of the fact that like I've just never felt like there was nothing to me, which might sound weird, but I remember looking in the mirror and being like, I'm just like a straight up and down board essentially. But I felt really powerful in that moment because I had achieved something that I set out to do. And like I said, my intention throughout the whole thing was just like, let's see how far I can push myself and if I can actually achieve it. So once I actually did it and I stepped on that fitness stage, I placed in the top 5. I felt so proud of myself and really proud of this new lifestyle that I had developed over the past few months. And I remember going into the parking lot to go home with my family, and one of the judges came up to me and said that I belonged on the Victoria's Secret runway. And that's the first time anybody had ever validated the fact that I had wanted to be a model. I had tried to go out for modeling competitions when I was still living in Colorado. I tried to get signed by a modeling agency when I got out to Arizona. She told me that I did not have the body that would be accepted in the industry. And it was the first time anybody outside of like my sweet family had said like, you're beautiful and you could be a model. And I got that fixated in my head again about like, okay, let's see how far I can take this. Let's see if I can actually do something with it. So I went into a modeling agency, I got signed, and I was just dedicated to maintaining this lifestyle that I had been living over the past 3 months, because I felt like all these doors were going to open up for me as long as I remained as thin as I was. So at the time, I had joined a sorority in college my sophomore year. So after I had started getting healthy again, a very shy girl came in, got into a sorority, and then I really didn't go to anything because I was so focused on training, and I didn't want to be around people that were out partying and eating unhealthy food and drinking. I was so regimented that by the time I went back into that environment and started trying to make friends there, everyone was so fixated on my dramatic weight loss that I was getting attention like I've never gotten before. Everybody wanted to work out with me, know exactly what I was doing. I was being asked if I could be a trainer. People were asking if they could take photos of me. It was just a weird flip that I had never experienced. And I felt so much worth coming solely from my appearance. Had nothing to do with my personality or anything outside of just like superficial means. And so it just really like instilled in my mind again throughout that time that like, if I'm smaller, I'm more confident, and then I'll put myself out there more, and then people will like me. And it was this cycle that I can now see, like hindsight, that's what I was doing. But at the time, again, I just figured what I was doing was I was just being an inspiration to other people, and I was finally making friends, and I was pushing myself. And I've learned that there's a difference between pushing yourself to be the best version of yourself and pushing yourself for the wrong reasons, pushing yourself for validation, or pushing yourself because you think that you're going to be more lovable or more beautiful or more desirable if you look differently. And I was so stuck in that ongoing chapter. But during that time is when I got approached to do Miss Arizona USA. So I had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into. My sorority sister signed me up for the pageant, and I figured it was going to be an awesome opportunity for me to at least further my modeling career, quote unquote. I had like one photo shoot at the time and had no idea where I was going to take anything with modeling, but figured this could open up some doors. So I competed with a couple of my sorority sisters. I remember it was, I think, $1,500 to enter the pageant, and I did not have $1,500 laying around. I was in school. I was working at a place called My Fit Foods and just didn't know how I was going to swing that. And then on top of it, you have to get your swimsuit and your gown and all your different outfits and your spray tan and your hair and the whole 9 yards. And that's when I kind of discovered this business skill that I had, or this entrepreneurial bug, if you will, because I started figuring like, what if I can get all of this sponsored? So I just started reaching out like crazy. I had my spray tan, my hair, my nails, every single outfit I wore, everything was sponsored. And I realized just having the confidence to ask, like people love to support people that they believe in, but you have to put yourself out there. You have to ask. And that was the most fun part for me, is meeting all these people, getting them on board, getting them excited to be able to watch me compete, even though I didn't even know what that really meant. And I had met some other people during the time that were able to help me get a gown and a swimsuit and the whole thing. So when I showed up for pageant weekend, it never crossed my mind that there was going to be a chance that I could win. It was more of, I went into it. I was really proud of myself for figuring out how I could get all this stuff sponsored. I had a couple girlfriends that were also competing. I wanted to have fun and just see what it was all about. And when they crowned me the winner, I was in such disbelief, especially because there had been so much in my own personal life happening the week leading up to the pageant. My family had been going through a difficult time leading up to the pageant. We had a major trauma happen in our family that everyone was recovering from in their own very unique, very different ways. And the week leading up to the pageant, my parents decided to split. And I realized that I didn't deal with anything that was happening in my personal life because I was so hyper focused on a goal and getting to the goal. And then it was like, eventually, like when I'm not so busy, I'll deal with any of the emotions or anything that's actually happening in my personal life. So I just kind of ran away from everything. And winning the pageant was the most beautiful, wonderful distraction ever, because I got a year where I focused on literally everything but my personal life. So there was so many bits and pieces of it that was so much fun and so exciting. And that year truly changed my entire life. But it was also the first time that I've been surrounded by individuals that did not have pure intentions, and their actions and my choices during that time had consequences. And I was just young and naive, and I was very trusting in the people that were surrounding me that told me that if I followed their way of doing things, that I would be successful. And when I won the pageant, I was still at a very small size, the thinnest that I've ever been. I was still putting my body through hell. I had extensions down to my butt. I was as tan as I could be, but I felt confident and I felt proud of myself. And even at the most confident that I had been in my life, I was being told for the first time all the things that needed to improve or all the things that were wrong with me. And it brought up insecurities that I never even knew I had. For example, I was told that I needed to get my boobs done before Miss USA. I needed to get all veneers. My teeth were too small and not proportionate with my face. So I needed all veneers. I needed Botox. My hair needed to be blonder. I needed to lose weight. I needed to learn how to style myself. I needed to be wearing heels everywhere I went. There were so many different dynamics. And I think not only was a lot of it pushed on me from other people, but I think a lot of it was me putting it on myself too, that I needed to be the person that everybody else thought that I was in order to live up to this unrealistic standard that I had in my mind about what Miss Arizona USA was supposed to be. And during that time, I really just wanted to share my message of healing myself holistically and confidence and believing in yourself and pushing yourself. Because in that chapter of my life, my 18, 19-year-old self, I had more moments of courage, and I had done more things that made me uncomfortable and pushed through that uncomfortability to create this amazing life than I ever had. And I was achieving things that I never even knew were possible. And that was the message that I wanted to share with people, is that you are the only one holding yourself back. So often we just say to ourselves that we can't achieve whatever we want to, or that I wish I could do that, or I wish I could do that, instead of taking action and believing that you can do that, you can achieve that. And that's what winning the pageant was for me. I set out to do something and I did it. And I didn't have that extra pressure on myself. And it's then when I learned a really valuable lesson that I've learned over and over and over again throughout the years. And that's that you can't force what's meant for you. That when you just work hard and work towards something that you want, if it's meant to be, it will happen. But when you're forcing it, and you're either torturing your body to achieve it, or you're just doing things that are inauthentic to you, even if you achieve that thing, it might not be meant for you. And I should have really marinated on that lesson when I had learned it right after that pageant. But going into Miss USA, I was so reliant on everyone else for making me into the person that I thought I should be at Miss USA. And I completely lost my confidence throughout the process. And it was a slow process that I didn't even realize it was happening until suddenly I woke up one day and looked in the mirror and didn't even recognize myself. I wasn't talking any longer about my mission of instilling confidence in young women and going after your dreams and being authentic to yourself, because I had really lost myself throughout the process. And all I was fixated on was losing weight and being small so that I could be beautiful when people saw me on national television. So I was not at all in a good headspace when I got to Miss USA. And given it was still such a cool experience, I'm so thankful that I got the opportunity to go there. I think now, looking back, I wish I was a little older and had a little bit more life lived before I went, because I would have realized truly how incredible it was. But being 19 when I actually got there, or maybe I was 20 at that point, it was like this, everything is so new and everyone's shiny and flashy and these women are amazing. And I just wanted to learn from the women that I was surrounded by. I just wanted to know their stories, and I wanted to know how they were so confident and so beautiful and so well spoken. And I was just pinching myself constantly that I was even in the same room with these people, because I didn't feel like I deserved to be there. When Miss USA actually rolled around and I made it to the top, I believe I was in the top 15 when they first called my state. So they scream Arizona. I walked down. Then we made it to the bikini portion, and I walked out right after like Florida Georgia Line and Nelly were performing, and strutted my stuff in my bikini. And I remember thinking horrible things about myself walking on that stage. And it makes me sad to even think about, because there's nothing wrong with me at all. But I was being so hard on myself, comparing myself to the point that it was just like, I don't even deserve to be up here. And to be honest, when they called top 5 and I wasn't in the group, I was so relieved, because I didn't feel like I deserved to be up there. And now I'm like, I wish I had the confidence then that I have now, and the foresight and the wisdom and the sense of self-worth. But I think a lot of the times our purpose comes from helping the person that we once were. And when I was 20 and it looked like I had everything going for me, I was literally crumbling inside because I couldn't get my confidence under control. And I kept thinking that if I could get to a point that I looked a certain way, then I would be confident, and then I could keep all of the positive things that were entering my life. I would get all the validation, and I could use my message to inspire other people. And I'd get these awesome opportunities and modeling contracts, and I'd get to travel, and all this stuff was riding on the fact that I just needed to look good enough. And I realized I had it all wrong. But at the time, I felt like something was wrong with me, that I just couldn't be smaller and I couldn't be more confident. And I didn't realize that I had the power to make a change. I was relying on other people to make changes for me. So when I gave up my title of Miss Arizona USA, instead of just dealing with the things that had happened in my personal life during that year, and instead of healing, and instead of trying to be better, I ran from everything and just didn't want to face a single thing. So I given I was also newly 21. So I'm traveling all over the place, having these birthday parties in Vegas and in New York, and just living this high life that was so much fun. I loved that chapter because I made so many awesome memories, but I also now know what I was doing. I was just running from any of my issues and my trauma that I needed to deal with. And when I got back from all the traveling and my early few months of being 21, I remember sitting at my mom's house. I just re-enrolled in school to get my degree and realizing that I was feeling depression for the first time in my life, that it was such a deep, overwhelming feeling of sadness and of failure. And I was too scared to tell anybody. I was too scared that at 21 years old, I genuinely thought that I had already ruined my life, that I didn't capitalize on the opportunities, and I wasn't some big time model or motivational speaker, and I wasn't getting the same attention. And I just thought that I had the world at my fingertips and I blew it because I gained weight. That's genuinely what was going through my mind. And I didn't realize at the time I was going through severe metabolic damage because I had done so much damage to my metabolism and to my system in that compact 6 months that my body was just out of whack trying to figure out what the heck was going on. If I was starving myself, if I wasn't, if I was taking fat burners, if I wasn't, I was all over the place. And I sat with that feeling for a long time. Honestly, I was too scared to talk to anybody about it. I was too scared to get myself in therapy. I was too scared to start medication, and nobody was talking about mental health. And so it's not even something that I realized I was struggling with. I just knew something was wrong with me. So I just stuffed it down as far as I could, went to school, got a corporate job, started just working that job and coming to terms with the fact that it was well, I already ruined my life. So I'm just gonna kind of go through my 9 to 5, try and make some money and settle down essentially. Cause I had all the fun stuff, already did all the fun stuff when I had those opportunities, but I blew it. So now I'm just going to settle. And I stayed in that place for far too long. And eventually I started realizing that I was no longer putting myself out there. I was no longer putting myself in situations where I could be meeting people, or I could be furthering my career, or I could be gaining skills, or I could be gaining confidence, or any of that, because I was holding myself back from everything. So I slowly started writing about it. And I published a few of my articles that I was writing, which really were just journal entries, to a blog that I had at the time, just talking about how I was feeling, because I just felt so isolated. And I didn't know if I was the only person that felt this way. And to my surprise, so many people started reaching out to me after they were reading these entries, just saying, I feel the same way. And it started clicking something in my brain that so many women are suffering in silence, whether it's suffering with their mental health or deep insecurity, confidence issues, or just confused about what they're doing in life. I think your 20s are such a confusing time because you go from really having things mapped out where you're going to school and you have to at least graduate high school. So you go through the motions, you get to that point, and then if you choose to go to college, you go to school, you go to your classes, you're trying to get your degree, you have things mapped out. But when that's not there, when that's gone, and it's up to you to decide what you want to do in life, it can be really overwhelming and it can be really stressful. And I think just vocalizing that and talking about that and being able to talk to other people and bounce ideas off of each other and build relationships and community that was deeper than just friendships that you would go out and drink with on the weekends. That's the kind of stuff I was craving. And that's what that blog started giving me. And slowly over time, it reminded me that I'm in control of my confidence. that I get to rewire the way that I'm thinking about myself. And I realize that nobody's coming to save me. During my 19, 20, early 21, I was so reliant on other people to tell me what I should do, what I should look like, what I should wear. And I didn't have a strong sense of self. I didn't really know what I stood for. And I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust my gut. I didn't trust my intuition. And during those couple years, not only did I have some deep personal stuff going on with my family, but I realized that there was a lot of forms of abuse that I had allowed to happen without realizing that they had even happened. There was financial abuse. There was abuses of power with different people in my life. There was emotional abuse. There was sexual abuse. There was so much compacted that I just didn't have the awareness to understand what had happened that led me to such a dark place. And I can't even say that while I was first starting my healing journey that I even realized that any of that stuff had even happened. I just knew that I was upset and I was trying to build up confidence, thinking that was going to fix everything. And for a while it did. For a while, I really focused on trying to rewire the way that I thought about myself. I started journaling. I started saying affirmations in front of the mirror. I started being really aware of how I was talking to myself mentally. I started writing like crazy and trying to treat myself like I would treat my little sister. Because if I heard my little sister say anything negative about herself or condescending about herself or damaging to her self-worth, I would be the first one to step in and prove her wrong and make sure that I could build her up. Yet I was bullying myself all day, every day, and then wondering why I was insecure. So I really got very intentional about the way that I thought about myself. I wrote nonstop about how I wanted to become more confident. And over time, it started working. And I started becoming really confident in myself and in my body. And at the time, I was like a size 6'8" and felt more secure in my skin than I did when I was at a size 0 a couple years prior, because I had this feeling of self-worth. And that's when I decided to put myself back into the modeling industry. And I wanted to push myself outside of my comfort zone. I missed that feeling of doing something, even though I was afraid. And I made a very brash decision to book a one-way ticket to New York City to try modeling in New York, which even now looking back on it, like I'm still shocked that I even made that decision, because I am such a scaredy cat and I had no ties to New York. And that's not somewhere that I ever really envisioned that I would end up. California was always on my radar, but for whatever reason, I had this really deep, strong desire to just push myself. So I did. And it was the most transformational couple years of my life. I was there for about 4.5 years. And the beginning was really tough, just trying to focus on building a career for myself. I was washing yoga mats while I was doing all these different secretary jobs all over the city while I was auditioning and trying to get signed by a modeling agency. And finally, after a few months, I finally got someone to take a chance on me. And I got signed by Wilhelmina. I had a 3-year contract that I was so hyped about. And I was dropped within like 3 months of that contract. 3 months seems to be a very ongoing trend in my life, that 90-day period. But I didn't have long with them before they just broke my contract, because I wasn't big enough, which was something that was so opposite of what I had experienced a few years prior, that they had signed me on their curve board and they wanted me to start padding whenever I went to these castings. And that was so against everything that I had done, all this work to rebuild my confidence and to stay true to me and to not allow other people to dictate what I did. And that's how I felt at that time, that it was like, no, you don't get to dictate how I change myself in order to be what you need me to be, if that makes sense. When you're in the modeling industry, it is extremely superficial. I mean, it has to be. The majority of what you're doing is imagery that people are just looking at. That's a superficial experience. But even the human part and the relationship part of the industry can also be very superficial. And I really wanted to remain myself throughout the process. And I didn't want to change my body throughout the process. I just wanted to see if I could make it and feel good enough just the way I was. And sticking true to that paid off. It took a long time before it did pay off. And finally, I got signed by an agency that accepted me just as I was and loved my message and really just wanted to support and develop me as a model throughout a period of time in my life where I really needed it. And I was so hyper fixated and just focused on getting signed and becoming a successful model and being able to support myself in one of the most expensive cities in the world. And once I got there and once I achieved everything that I wanted to achieve, that feeling of overwhelming sadness came back. And it was so beyond frustrating for me because it was like, I've done everything that I wanted to do. I was in a happy, healthy, stable relationship. I had my dream career that I was working towards. I was meeting these incredible people. I was living in a city that I loved. I should have been feeling fulfilled, but I didn't, and I wasn't. And I couldn't figure out why. And it got to such a difficult point that I started having panic attacks constantly. And I was so overwhelmed by feelings of anxiety and depression that I was no longer even excited about the life that I was building out there, even though everything seemed to be okay. You know, those feelings when it's like everything's good, but yet I feel really, really sad. And I was kind of at war with that feeling, especially because I had developed all of these tools to cope with feelings like this. And I felt confident and I couldn't figure out what else I needed to do to get myself better. And finally, it got to a point that I was at such a low place that I had reached out to a woman that I didn't even know. I saw her preach at my church and I loved her. And something like deep within me was just like, you need to have a conversation with her. I asked her if she wanted to get coffee, and it was just like word vomit about all this stuff that I was struggling with. And she recommended that I reach out to a therapist. And that same feeling of fear about signing up for therapy and exploring the idea of medication was just terrifying, honestly. And I kept thinking like, I can fix myself on my own. I don't need anybody else. So then finally, after even months of struggling with that, it was like, okay, I'm just going to try. What do I have to lose? And when I signed up for therapy, I went into it feeling like it wasn't going to do anything, but that I would just try because I heard other people talk about the fact that like it could be great. And when I tell you that that decision completely changed my life, I mean it. I learned things about myself and I realized things about myself that opened up a whole new world to me. It opened up new doors. I realized how much I had been holding myself back because I was just stuck and blocked by things in my past that I never dealt with. And that was another really deep lesson that I learned, that you take you with you wherever you go. And if you don't deal with the trauma that you've experienced and you don't heal from it, it's always going to creep up and bite you in the ass at the worst possible times. And that's exactly what was happening. I had pushed so much aside for so long and chosen to ignore it and almost just blocked it out of my mind that eventually it just all caught up to me. And it was really, really difficult for me to try and relive all of these very painful experiences gain the awareness of what actually happened, and heal. It was a long journey. I'd say it took me about 1.5 years of consistent weekly therapy. And I got on anxiety medication for the first time and really went on this deep mental health dive. And when I realized the impact that anxiety and depression and mental health has on every aspect of your life, it was mind-blowing to me that I had genuinely never heard people talk about mental health in such a casual format, that it always was like, oh, mental illness is like the crazy people that you see on the street. There was just no information out there about it. And I didn't realize that the people that I was looking up to were also actively seeking help for their mental health. It just was stuff that wasn't really talked about. Even I'm a 90s baby, and just being raised, it wasn't really talked about. And then you add in the layer of like a superficial industry, like the modeling industry, really wasn't talked about. And it developed this deep passion inside of me to normalize the way that I was feeling, because I didn't want other people to be suffering in silence and to be dealing with the feelings that I had, thinking that they're alone. Because the second I realized I wasn't alone, it's like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. I felt so much more empowered. I felt like I could take a deep breath. I felt like I could be the most authentic version of myself. There was a couple years in my life that I just felt like I was holding on to so many secrets. And my mental health battle was a secret that I was holding on to, that I felt like if somebody knew that I was struggling, they would look at me differently, or they would no longer respect me, or it would make me weak. And what I realized is that once I dealt with the deep and very big and very valid and very real emotions that I was experiencing, and I was able to label them, heal from them, and become aware, suddenly my emotional health, my emotional maturity, my way to handle every big thing that was happening in life just got so much easier. Once I finally started addressing my mental health, it felt like every other aspect of my life started coming together. That the confidence journey that I had been on, that kind of clicked into place. My mental health, my emotions were in check. My relationships started becoming so much better. The deep belief in myself, my sense of knowing my purpose, everything just got so much stronger and so much greater because I was looking at it from a holistic view. And I knew that I wanted to take my passion of instilling confidence in young women and sharing my message about being fearful but doing it anyways, and having small moments of courage that can change your life, and being able to talk to women is something that was an ongoing trend throughout so many different chapters in my life. And I also really wanted to figure out a way that I could not only share bits and pieces of my story, but bring these amazing women on that I admire and that I respect and share their stories. Because for so long, I had wondered if the people that I look up to, if the women that I admire are experiencing the same struggles that I am. So I got to meet these women that I really looked up to and admired, and had just normal conversations with them, and got to talk about their confidence journeys and their mental health, and seeing that it is something that everybody deals with. It was mind-blowing to me. And I wanted to figure out a way that I could take those conversations and magnify them, that I could have women from my hometown in Monument, Colorado listen to, that I could have people all over the world tune into these conversations and hear from the people that they admired that they are not alone, that they're also struggling, and the tactical tools that are helping them overcome some of their struggles, and see if it can help other people. It's forming this sense of community and this sense of belonging for people that were feeling the same way that I have felt. It's been an ongoing trend throughout my life. And that's really part of how More Than started. A lot of it was really going to just be conversations with women in the modeling industry because that's very much what I was a part of at the time. And when I came up with More Than a Model, it was to be able to give voices to the incredible women that I was meeting at these castings and at these jobs that had the most unbelievable stories, to be able to share that so that women everywhere could hear that these women that they look up to, that are in commercials and magazines and are being idolized for this unrealistic standard of beauty, that they're still facing the exact same things that my friends back in Monument, Colorado are facing. I wanted to be able to bridge that gap. And the only way I knew how to do that is by launching a podcast. And I had been working on More Than and conceptualizing it, trying to figure out exactly what it was going to look like for a while. And then the pandemic happened. And I had all these tools in place already that I'm like, okay, a podcast, we're just going to go and we're going to just see what this can become. And now 3 years later, I can honestly say that the conversations that we've had on this platform and the women that I've been able to interview and get to know and now call friends have been life-changing for me. This podcast has truly been so healing and so eye-opening, and I feel like I continuously get to learn from the women that I admire. And it's so fulfilling to me to know that there's women all over that I've never met in person, but that can find the I Am More Than podcast and listen to these episodes and not feel alone and feel like they can have a sense of belonging and be part of this community and be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. That's what I've always wanted. And that's what I want this More Than movement to be, that it's a bunch of flawed, imperfect women all coming together to celebrate being multifaceted and to help each other navigate life. Life's confusing. Life's hard. Your 20s are full of so many different changes and monumental decisions, but then you get into your 30s and you're trying to now settle in to some of the decisions that you've made and make new ones. And then you go into your 40s and it's just this ongoing journey and evolution that I feel like women need to be supported in all those different stages. And I not only want to be able to use the wisdom and the experiences that I've learned over the past 10 years to help the 21-year-old version, very lost version of myself. I want to use those skills to help her. And I also want to keep learning skills from the women that are in this chapter of life with me and grow together. I don't have all the answers, but I'm so curious and so passionate about actively seeking out answers, not only for myself, but also for the women in this community. So I really am proud of what we've been able to put out. I'm really proud of the women that we've been able to have on the story and how they've been able to share their journeys in such a vulnerable and authentic and amazing way. And I feel like I owed you all the same thing. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper and be more vulnerable and share new sides and go a little bit more into depth about the passion behind More Than. And I want to be able to use my passion for purpose, and I want to be able to use my pain for purpose. And I think not only is that a deep desire within me, but now you all know a lot of the reasons behind why this fuels me so much. And I'm just really grateful that I've had as much support as I've had. And I hope that if there's somebody that's listening that can resonate with the feelings that I've had over the last decade that I just took you through and had similar experiences or felt similar ways, I want you to know that it gets better, especially if you're struggling right now. It gets better, but that nobody can save you and nobody can do the work for you, and that you can really be the hero of your own story. Stop relying on other people to make you better. Don't rely on a spouse. Don't rely on a significant other. Don't rely on your career. Don't rely on your children. You really have to find your self-worth for yourself, and you need to find the inner motivation to want to be the best version of yourself. And that comes with discovering who you truly are, what you're passionate about, embracing all these different sides of you, building community and having people around you that are here to support you. This is such an ongoing journey, and one that I really believe that it's just brief moments of courage that can really change your whole life. It's being scared and doing it anyways. And when you invest in yourself and in your confidence, I really do believe that confidence is the foundation for everything. Once you realize that you are enough just as you are, and you start holding yourself with confidence and you start putting in the work, I truly believe that you can achieve literally anything that you want. So I hope that my story and my journey can be encouraging for you. I hope that if it relates to you in any way, that you just know that you're not alone. Something that I really wanted to know just a couple years ago. So I appreciate you being on this journey with me. I appreciate you supporting more than for supporting me, for listening to this wild journey. I'm sure there's bits and pieces of rambling, but I hope you were able to take away some little golden nuggets of wisdom. Take it, run with it. If parts of this episode resonated with you, I'd absolutely love to hear from you. And I'm excited to just continue growing together. Like I've said, we are a community of imperfect women that are just embracing being multifaceted. And I am so excited to continue growing in front of all of you, with all of you. So thank you for all of the encouragement and the healing that you've done for me. I really appreciate it. So we will be back next week with another incredible guest. If you love this episode, please take a second to follow our show, rate, review, you know the drill, share, and I'd love to hear from you. If my DMs are open, if you want to reach out. And yeah, thank you guys for listening.